Okay, hello everyone, and welcome to Virtual Vocations Q&A session for remote job search strategies in 2021. I am Leyva, Career Services Manager for Virtual Vocations, and we will be joined by our CEO, Laura Spahn, and Paige Judnich, one of our coaches and resume writers. They're here with us today to share some information and to answer your questions. First, we'd like to thank you for taking the time out and joining us here today. We'd love to hear from you as we get started. So as everyone is joining in, if you'd like, you'll see there's a chat box if you hover at the bottom of your screen where you can tell us where you're joining us from today. So if you can go ahead and let us know that here while everyone's logging in. I will talk a little bit about Virtual Vocations. So we've got Ken from Sarasota, Florida. Wow, a lot. From New York and Austin, Texas, New Jersey, Colorado. Welcome, everyone. Someone from Seattle, Atlanta, Georgia. Welcome, Lori, from Columbus, Ohio. Great. Welcome, everyone. So a little bit about Virtual Vocations. We are a family-owned company, and we've been helping job seekers with their remote search since 2007. And in that time, we've helped over 3 million job seekers. And we have a great team of researchers that vet new employers and new jobs every day, and we add more than 30,000 remote and work from home jobs to our database each month. Recently, it's been quite a few more jobs in a single month. We also partner with more than 3,500 companies that post remote jobs directly with Virtual Vocations. And one unique thing about Virtual Vocations is that we are a membership-based service. We have 2 different membership levels, basic and premium. One of the benefits to our premium membership, of course, is access to our group coaching sessions, along with discounts for our individual career services. So just checking to see where everybody is from still. We've got a lot of people joining us. Cheryl from the Oregon coast, Kathleen from Montgomery, Texas. Welcome, everyone. So with that, we'll go ahead and turn the time over to Laura to start the next part of our presentation.
Thank you, Holly, and hello, everyone. Thanks for being here today. So before we dive into some strategies for your remote job search and begin answering all of your questions, I just wanted to spend a couple of minutes and highlight some of the change that we've seen in remote work this past year, and also what we expect to see as we move forward into 2021. So in particular, we want to look at what that means for you as the job seeker, and whether you're looking to just start working remotely, continue working remotely, or transition to a new career. That's our goal today, is to help you get started with that. So 2020 started out with the same historical increase that we normally see in remote jobs during the first quarter of each year. But of course, when March came around and all of the lockdowns started happening and shutdowns, and employers were forced to take their teams and allow them to work remotely, we started seeing a huge switch, and our job researchers saw on their end, of course, a very large uptick in remote jobs over the entire rest of the year. And basically, Virtual Vocations, according to our internal data, we experienced an increase of 44% remote jobs that we screened and added to our database. Now, those jobs, we have very specific criteria, like travel restrictions. We will only post jobs that allow a certain amount, as well as whether jobs were remote only during the pandemic versus long-term remote. So even with some of those exclusions, we still experienced a 44% increase, which is massive and really indicative of a major shift in general towards remote work, which is wonderful. And another interesting finding on top of that is our top remote industries stayed relatively the same, with IT and healthcare, sales positions still leading the remote work. What happened was that employers in those industries allowed more of those positions to be filled remotely. So that also told us, okay, in general, employers are starting to really embrace the value of remote work as a viable business model. So as we move forward into 2020 and so many businesses were growing and embracing remote work, I'm sure, there have been, it's been all over the news, so many studies. One in particular with Gartner, they estimated that globally, 88% of businesses shifted some of their work in some way to remote. And then we know, notable companies like Facebook. Oh, Holly, could you switch over the slide? Thank you. Facebook, Shopify, Square. I mean, some really big name companies just announced that they were fully embracing remote work and making that shift. So with all of that happening, we are definitely seeing a trend towards overall just remote work as part of our future. In fact, Upwork's most recent future work report estimates that 25% of people are now working remotely. And of that 25%, that will increase by another 87% in the next 4 years. So, I mean, basically all of this data is great. Yes, everybody's getting on board with remote work, but what does that really mean for you in your career and as a job seeker? And that is exactly what we want to talk about today, because what we're seeing and what employers are shifting towards is realizing they have access now to such a big talent pool on a much wider scale that it becomes even more crucial for job seekers to position themselves in a way where they are able to communicate, their career documents are up to date, they have online interviewing and communication skills. A lot of what helps you get a job, or what has helped in the past in traditional positions where you're interviewing in person, or at least doing a portion of the process in person, is now shifting dramatically. And so with that in mind, we have come up with some different strategies, a job search plan, and steps that you can take as a job seeker throughout this coming year and beyond, whatever your goals are for your remote career search. But certainly what we're going to talk about today is geared towards helping you make your presence and your unique value prominent, and sell yourself more online in this new remote work landscape that we're experiencing. So with that being said, let's move on to the following slides, and we'll answer specific questions as we move through the slides. Paige Judnich, one of our expert career coaches, is going to take us through the slides, and then as she talks about them, feel free to put all of your questions in the Q&A box, and Holly and I and Paige will all do our best to get those answered. And we have Marie, one of our customer support team members, on hand as well to help answer any other questions that we're not able to get to. So with that being said, let's turn it over to Paige. It's all yours.
Thank you, Laura. Hi, everyone. I am so excited to be here today. I love talking about career development. Just to give you a little bit of a background on me, I have about a 10-year career in human resources where I was on the talent acquisition side. And then I moved over into resume writing and career development for candidates. So one of my favorite things about Virtual Vocations is all of the tools that they offer you to really allow you to succeed. They want to make sure that you are getting the jobs that you need in that virtual work environment. So we wanted to talk about a couple steps just to maybe allow you to work through that thought process and maybe make a plan in order to prepare those documents and those application materials and make sure that you're set up for success in your job campaign. I like to call it a job campaign. First thing, structurally, if you just have a comment or a chat, I am watching the chat on Zoom. So if you want to just kind of add something in, I welcome that, and I will probably see it unless there's 10 at a time. And then also, if you have a structured question, Holly will be able to ask me that as we, before we transition to the next slide. So the first slide that I wanted to talk to you about is the first step is to identify your remote work goals. So this is kind of a new environment for some people. Some of you may have been in the remote work world for the last 10 years. Some of you might be interested in moving into this for more full-time. Maybe you went remote during the pandemic and you're thinking, hey, this might work with my lifestyle a little bit more. And so just really working to make sure, I always tell my clients that you are interviewing an employer as much as they are interviewing you, and you want to make sure that they're offering you a job that's going to be a good fit for you in the long term. So an easy example of this is the number of hours. So something to consider, the remote work level. Would you like to do a half and half or a 1-day remote situation? The type of employment that you're looking for, the amount of flexibility within your schedule. Do you have to have set hours where you're signed in, or can you do it in your PJ pants and slippers from 9 p.m. to midnight after your kids go to bed? So what kind of wage are you looking for? Always important in any job search. And then what kind of job, specifically what titles you're looking for. So as far as goal setting or targets, do we have any questions? If we'll give a minute to put that in the Q&A, or any questions at all that Laura or I could answer.
Yeah, so let me take a look, and I apologize, I forgot to mention that up front that we'll be doing a live Q&A throughout the session. So if you hover over the bottom of your screen by the chat, you'll see a Q&A box where you can enter those questions, and we'll try and get to that for each slide. So let's take a look here and see what we have. Yes, I'm getting lots of questions about whether the slides or the recording will be available after the session, and we will send that out via email by the end of the week. So everybody should have that. Everyone who's registered should have that. Okay. So we are getting some questions in here, and they're in the chat and in the Q&A. Okay, so we have a question about for LinkedIn for working remote. I believe we have a slide on LinkedIn, so we'll touch on that in a little bit. If you have specific questions on finding specific positions and you need help with those, finding those roles in our system, our customer service team can help with that as well. But any questions on goal setting? Laura, do you want to look at the chat to see if you see those, and I'll go through them? Okay.
So some of the questions that I'm seeing come in, it looks to me like a few people have goals that relate to more of career transitions, which is definitely, we are seeing a lot of at this point, where people who have traditionally been working on site, and some of you are mentioning HR in particular, are looking to transition to an online role and wondering if your experience will basically translate over to online work. And I mean, as far as speaking to HR in particular, absolutely. HR, depending on the function that you feel, most HR roles can be done via desktop. I mean, most of it is digital. In fact, our internal HR systems are all remote-based company software and platforms that we use. There are wide opportunities for HR consultants, especially right now as companies are transitioning over to remote work. They're wondering how that fits in as far as legalities, additional paperwork their employees need to fill out, everything from office ergonomics, anything that would traditionally go through an HR department during a hiring process. So I would say absolutely most office-based careers have some component that can transition over. And what I like to tell people is, if you aren't really sure if some of your skills are transferable, I would suggest doing job searches based on specific skills and experience that you have, rather than using a specific job title. That way you can kind of see what pops up, what employers are looking at and feel are transferable in the remote work setting. So that would be my answer to those of you that mentioned the HR and administrative remote work.
Okay. And then we have a question about negotiating wages, specifically for remote work, but just in general. Paige, do you have a quick tip on that?
Negotiating wages, I always recommend ask for what you want, but at the same time, push that conversation until the end of the process. So it really depends on the company. I think for the companies I've worked with in the past, we had a $30,000 range for annual salary. So if that range is $50,000 to $80,000, and you say, I need to at least get $50,000 a year, then you've just pocketed yourself into the lowest wage possible. So I always say, if you can possibly say, I'm ready to hear your most competitive offer based off my experience, then that's a good way to start. Sometimes you do need to start talking numbers, and it will become really apparent in the process when that needs to happen. And then don't be afraid of a counter negotiation. As someone who hired all the time, once I've offered you the job, I really want you to take that job. So there's nothing wrong with counter offering. The worst they can do is say no. But it is a very, very difficult topic. And I highly recommend engaging over a coaching session on Virtual Vocations to have that conversation with, okay, this is where I'm at. This is what they're telling me. I have counseled on many salary negotiations, and not one of them has gone the same way. So it's really important to ask those individual questions to a consultant that can provide you with the support that you need to offer the answers that are specific to you. Does that make sense? Unfortunately, I wish there was a black and white answer. There's just not.
Okay, thank you. Yeah.
I just wanted to add really quick, Holly, Teresa, she just asked the question about salary ranges for all the different types of jobs that we post. Mm-hmm. And I just wanted to kind of mention how our site functionality works. When our researchers take a look at the jobs, they're looking for what type of payment, whether it's a salary, hourly, contract rate, piecework. So that is our focus, as Paige pointed out. And what I see frequently for remote work is that there is the negotiating going back and forth, because there are factors as far as cost of living wherever you are at versus where the headquarters of the company is. So negotiating seems to happen a little bit more frequently. So as far as on our site, we focus more on the type of compensation it is, and then leave it up to the employer and the candidate to work that out.
Okay. So there are a few questions about the functionality kind of the site, and we can go over maybe a couple of those really quick. But Dennis is asking about jobs being posted as 30 days as a default. And then we've had some questions about making sure, are we confirming that the jobs are current and open when we post them? And so, yes, when we post jobs, our research team has not only vetted those positions, but make sure that they are active and available at the time we post them. And we do have a 30-day time frame on those positions to make sure that all of the jobs on our site are current, active, and open positions. If we're going to repost after that point, then we check back and make sure that that's still going to be open with the employer and extend that a little bit longer. But yes, we do make sure that everything is open when it's posted.
And I want to address, I just read something in the chat about someone who's wanting to take a step back from their career. That's okay. We're in a really difficult time right now. And a lot of us have had to take a step back to care for someone who's maybe sick, or care for a family member, help children through remote learning. That's something that's heavy in my life right now. I would just recommend honesty and transparency. I have taken a 3-year sabbatical. The main thing that I try to do, if you are taking a step back and taking a job that maybe doesn't have the required skill sets or the expertise that you're accustomed to make sure that you're nurturing those skill sets so that you have the opportunity to move forward into that position at a later date if that's what you want to do. So this person was asking, hey, can I go part-time for a while? Is this going to ruin my career? And unfortunately, I think it's an understandable step. We all have situations in our life, even not considering the pandemic, that have required us to take a step back. So I think I had about 2 years where I was a stay-at-home caregiver, and I really just refocused on everything I did to nurture my human resources and career development skill set while I was taking those 2 years to take care of my family. So always think about those peripheral things that you can add onto your resume, and that will really help. But that is a very okay goal to take a step back, I guess is what I'm saying. But I think we're ready to move to the next slide. Is that right, Holly?
We can definitely do that. Let me move to the next one. Step 2.
Okay, so kind of along those lines, discovering your hard and soft skills. So a soft skill example is collaborative communication, adaptivity, flexibility, things like that, strategic leadership. Hard skills examples are more like tech savvy. So are you comfortable on Google Meet? Are you comfortable on Zoom? Are you comfortable on all these other kind of collaborative, interactive software that we now have to survive in this remote world, and various online tools? So a lot of times for clients, what I'll do is I'll break up those sections, especially, for example, if you are an IT candidate, I'll break up those sections and I'll show, I call it core competencies or technical abilities, so that if someone is really focused in on those hard skills, then their eye will be able to switch directly to those technical skills. If someone's more focused on those soft skills, we want someone with the right soft skills and we can train them on everything else kind of situation, then their eye will gravitate towards that other section. And that's something that we call the keywords that you'll put in your resume to try to either attract the human reader or attract the I call them the robot reader or the applicant tracking system. What questions do you guys have about keywords, hard skills, soft skills, specifically to your application materials, your resume, your LinkedIn, things like that?
All right, thanks, Paige. Let's see if we have any questions related to that.
I know we have a slide coming up on LinkedIn, but I think Eleanor asked a really relevant question where she mentions that she's kind of old school and private, and is LinkedIn necessary? So I'm wondering if Paige or, yeah, do you want to
take that one? Here's what I always tell my clients: LinkedIn is necessary. It's the business. It's your way to network online. So I always say having excellent application materials, your resume, your cover letter, they're very important, but networking is what gets you that job. And now we have the opportunity to network online. So the bare bones advice that I always give: if you hate LinkedIn, make sure your profile is on point and it matches your resume. So make sure it's up to date. Get on once a week, twice a week, and comment. Don't just like, but comment on the post, and that keeps you relevant. So LinkedIn is also a very good opportunity to apply for jobs. You can also apply through Virtual Vocations and things like that, but they do have job opportunities on there. They do have hiring managers looking on there. So I read a stat once that said a lot of hiring managers, I'm not going to give you a number because I don't want to be incorrect, a lot of hiring managers will actually hire through LinkedIn before they even open the position. So LinkedIn is very important. It's a great way to network during this pandemic. I totally understand the hesitancy with it. Sometimes it can feel a little overwhelming, but if you just get on once a week, maybe update 1 or 2 things in your profile and go through and comment on the feed, not just like, but comment, then that will keep your profile more relevant and you won't be perceived as dormant through hiring managers and things like that.
Paige, I think that is perfect advice and a response. And I think in my experience, when we've hired internally, definitely, I like to call it a person's digital footprint, but it's basically a quick high-level overview to me of their soft skills and hard skills. when I am looking at online profiles, when I'm Googling them, you can tell if somebody, and I liked your word, is dormant online with their skill set if they are not keeping up to date with the current practices in whatever industry it is. LinkedIn is a great place to check and see, hey, has somebody, who is an active job seeker, do they have a current profile? Are they active? Do they know how to be active on an online platform? All of those are little clues that give an employer or a recruiter just a really quick overview of a person's very basic communication, collaboration, their tech savviness without going any further in the process. So I think, your response was great. And I would say absolutely it's necessary. And it ties directly into these hard and soft skills as well. So.
Right. And I think, Holly, if you move to the next slide, it's a nice transition to talk about the benefit of a digital makeover. So
Okay.
that is what Laura's talking about with the LinkedIn profile, update tips, making sure that you have your about section. And that's something that I do for a lot of our virtual vocation clients is I write LinkedIn summaries that you can copy and paste and put into your profile. So if you're not feeling confident, you can collaborate with me and I'll write it for you. You'll provide edits and feedback. I'll fine tune it and then we'll move forward. So you're not alone. There's always help available. The main thing for the resume is just to make sure that your resume caters to an ATS format. If you're submitting your resume to an online profile, that means it's going to be screened and reviewed most likely by a system prior to being reviewed by a human reader. So you always want to draft your resume in a way that appeals to the human reader as well as the ATS system. So that's what the slide refers to as far as an ATS format. Adding action words, you're trying to make your document as engaging as possible. I always tell my clients, when is the last time that you read an article on BuzzFeed and there wasn't a picture or a bolded heading line or anything? You can't just do black and white. I always try to just add a little pop of color into my resumes to make it interesting and dynamic, but easy to edit, because you do need to individualize that resume for each position that you apply for. So titling your resume is a really good way to do that. You can change it. If you're applying for IT manager, you change it to IT manager. If you're applying for an IT director, you change it to IT director. So it's just making sure that you're showing that hiring manager that you really want that position. And then keeping your resume to, I never write a resume more than 2 pages. I'm sure at the C-suite level, maybe there's a justification for 3. But remember, it's a summary. It's not a cohesive CV, such as a professor or something would provide to a college. So it's very important to recognize that this resume is a summary. It's wanting the hiring manager to give you a call and move to the interview process. So updating your resume and your LinkedIn to make sure that it caters to the digital world that we live in, as well as catering to remote work. You want to let the potential employer know that you are ready to work remotely. And that way you can kind of adjust your keyword section and adjust your executive summary to say that, hey, I know this is a remote job and I'm ready to work remote 40 hours a week, 20 hours a week, whatever the position entails. What questions do we have for creating a digital makeover with your application materials?
Yes, I like that you're talking about, personalizing the resume and the title at the top mirroring, of course, the job description, the job title. We're getting some questions about how to use keywords. So just, I can share just really quick. When I'm creating a resume or when we're creating a resume, we typically ask for some job descriptions, some target job descriptions. And then those are really good resources to go through to find those keywords. They're typically listed under the requirements or throughout the job descriptions. And then those are the words that you want to plug into your resume each time. And so then we're getting questions about what percentage do you want to match up on those keywords? There are a lot of different scanning websites that will take a look at your resume versus the job description and tell you how well you match up. And Paige, what's your experience with that on the back end?
On the back end, I worked with a myriad of hiring managers. So for me, I'm from Missoula, Montana. So I didn't have to deal with 300 resumes for a position. So I would give everything a quick scroll, and I could tell, I think I scheduled about 30 seconds to review your resume, but upon reviewing the research, I was pretty dang generous. Most people will review it for about 8 to 12 seconds. But if you had a larger search situation where you had 300, 400 candidates, what the hiring manager does is they include 3 keywords, most of the time pulled from the job vacancy announcement. That's why it's so valuable that Virtual Vocations asked for those 2 key job descriptions so that we can start to refine that keyword search even when we're developing your base resume. So what I tell clients is, I'm developing your base resume. You will need to edit this for every position. So save this one, John Smith resume, and then John Smith ABC company, John Smith, XYZ company, that sort of thing. So you're always going back to your base resume, and you will want to review through the job vacancy that you're pursuing and then add in those keywords. So as a resume writer, I look at those 2 to 3 job descriptions and I'll pull keywords and put them into your resume for you. The idea being that those keywords will probably stay somewhat the same because you're going to be applying for positions within the same industry. So.
Right. Oops. So one of the questions talks about some of the job advertisements being poorly written, and how do you find those? And I think that's important to get kind of, a few of them, 3 or 4, 3 to 5 of those. So you have some with some meat in it and some keywords and key phrases you can pull from. And as you look through those, if you're looking in a similar industry, you'll see, a lot of those keywords and key phrases repeated, and you'll know those are the ones that you need. But yes, there are some very lean job descriptions out there for sure.
All right. I pick my favorite most of the time as a writer.
I think Glenda, she had a really good question about cutting and pasting parts of her resume. Should you do that with trying to keep your LinkedIn profile consistent with what is on your resume, or should the LinkedIn profile, I really liked her wording, should be a reimagined expression of the same experiences on her resume? I would, from my experience, definitely rewrite it and have it new, fresh, of course, matching the information on your resume, the employment, the work history. I think LinkedIn and your resume should be 2 supporting pieces of information that tell an employer about your qualifications and skills, but definitely you wouldn't want an employer to go to your LinkedIn profile and have it be the exact same wording, and for them to be able to see it's basically a duplicate of your resume.
Right.
So.
An easy way to do that, Laura, is just turn it into the first person. So I call LinkedIn the business casual of the resume is business professional and the LinkedIn is business casual. The other thing that I focus on is the about section. So that should all be very new, fresh content. And so when we finalized a resume, I often send my clients a list of 5 or 6 questions so I can get some fresh content from them. And then I put that most of the time in the about section, because research shows that most hiring managers will only review your job title in the about section. And then as long as everything's kind of matching up, they don't really read the rest unless they're interviewing you. I always say they eventually do read everything, but it's that first initial resume review, LinkedIn review that I'm kind of referring to, where they just kind of review that top portion. So you need to make sure that that's perfect. But an easy way to do it with your job descriptions is to turn it into a first person situation if you wanted to. It is very difficult to constantly have to rehash your content. And I totally understand that. But that's why you can sometimes engage with a consultant, or if that doesn't work, with a friend that you might know, but make it a collaborative process.
Okay, perfect. And we are getting a couple of questions about ageism and the length of your resume. There's a question about keeping it to 1 page, or those that are longer. than 2 pages. So kind of that 2-page is the sweet spot where you want to be, unless it's very entry level. But we did do a webinar a couple of weeks ago about creating your resume specifically in regards to ageism. So we can include that link when we send out the recording. Any just quick tips about that, Paige, before we move on?
It really depends on the client. If it is going to destroy your ego to have a 1-page resume, then don't do a 1-page resume. It's totally fine to have a 2-page. I get really excited when you're going to fit it into a 1-page resume, because I had a client the other day who had 30 years of experience at the same job. Well, I don't want to list your jobs prior to that because they're not very relevant. So I got all excited because I was going to fit it into 1 page, and they were like, no. So we expanded it to 2 pages. That's fine. As a hiring manager, it's much easier to read a 1-page resume. I'm a little bit more open. Some people really have that black and white. Oh, if you have 10 years or more of professional experience, you should have a 2-page resume. I really think it's up to you and your comfort level. There are hiring managers out there who just expect a digital QR code that you scan and your digital resume is going to pop up. And then there's hiring managers that have been hiring since 1989, and they're going to expect a resume that looks like it's from 1989. So you want to make the application materials that you're the most comfortable with. 4 or 5 pages, that's going to be a real challenge for a hiring manager to read. So within that 1-2 page limit at the C-suite level, maybe 3 pages. But, and those final pages, people just aren't going to read it. That's the big concern.
Paige, I think one of your comments in there, it goes perfectly with the next slide about the job search process, and specifically doing your research on the employers, and that includes on the hiring manager, if you can find out who that is. Like you said, some hiring managers have been hiring for 20, 30 years, and they are probably going to expect a certain format or be comfortable with that format. So if you're doing research before applying on who you're actually going to be communicating with, that can go a long way in informing you on how to go about approaching your career documents.
Absolutely. And LinkedIn is a really great way to try to connect with that. I had a client where we were trying to connect with someone at Kaiser Permanente in Oakland, California, and she actually dug through and found a LinkedIn connection, messaged them, and they said, oh, you're going to be interviewing with so-and-so. Here's what they're about. Here's what's going on. So that's a really nice life hack, to be active on LinkedIn and be able to connect with these people. And that person didn't have a personal relationship with her. She just felt with her as a job seeker, and she reached out, and then she messaged her right back and gave her the details of what was going to happen and what to expect. So that's a nice networking opportunity when you're looking for jobs. So I will talk about the step 4, search and apply for remote jobs. So the most important part of your job search is organization. The more you can organize what you applied for, what you sent, when you sent it, things like that, it really does help you move through, especially when you're applying for a multitude of jobs. And if you're experiencing unemployment, then there's a good chance that you're applying for up to 20 jobs all at one time. So make sure you're applying for the right job. Don't apply for just any job. I used to hire for an assistant manager, and the people that would apply for it, I was like, you don't even have the basic qualifications. So why are you wasting my time, and why are you wasting your time applying for that? So make sure you're applying for the right job, the job that you might have qualifications for. The beauty of a remote job search is that your job search just spanned across the nation. So it's really exciting, and there's a lot more opportunities. So there is a good possibility that you could be applying for a lot of jobs all at once. And create a short list and really kind of work through that. Whatever organization tool works best for you. I like to use Excel. When did I send it? When did I do this? Okay, here's the response that I've gotten. How should I follow up? Have I looked on LinkedIn for people to network with? Things like that. So staying organized is really, really important. Do we have any questions on that?
Yeah, let me check. We have had a couple about remote jobs and salary. So if we want to talk about that for a second. And so one of the questions is, speaking to applying for remote jobs, you could be anywhere in the nation. Some employers base the wages on the state that they are located in versus where the applicant might be, and vice versa. So any recommendations on how to handle that, or just doing some research? And that may just depend on the employer and how they handle that, and what their policies are. Do you have any other tips on that or stats, Laura?
I think when you're talking about remote jobs that are location specific, usually employers are looking at that from probably an HR perspective, some of the laws around the taxes in their state. Sometimes some states have very significant differences that make it really difficult to just getting through paperwork to have an employee within that state. So some employers will, they will have location-specific remote positions, even if the position is fully remote. So I think when you're looking for jobs, definitely keep an eye out for that situation. And like you said, it's doing the research on the employer up front and on the type of position that it is, what they're expecting. I think another thing to keep in mind when you are especially looking for a remote position is looking at the culture of a company. It may be a really great fit as far as the experience, the requirements. I would recommend doing research and looking at reviews of current and past employees to kind of get a feel for what the company culture was. Are you expected to be online 8 hours a day? Is management really hard to communicate with? How experienced are they with remote work? And just kind of get a feel for the expectations. I mean, a position may be perfect for you skills wise, but if it's not, in any other way, I mean, that's one of the big aspects of remote work. And as you're looking to search and apply for remote jobs, especially with how many are becoming available, I would definitely take the time to kind of research and get your short list down of jobs and companies. So
absolutely. And just functionally with that question, what an HR person is doing, or a compensation analyst, they're doing a compensation review for the area. So Missoula, Montana has a lower cost of living than Seattle. So they're going to try to offer you less based off that fact. That's their job. Their job is to offer a competitive salary to a competitive employee and have them accept the position. However, your job is to make sure that you're receiving a competitive salary based off your expertise. And so knowing that, like, hey, I live in an area that maybe has a lower cost of living, but that doesn't mean that my expertise shouldn't be valued. And that's where the negotiation comes into play. So I like Laura's point of just saying, know where you are, do the research, make sure you understand what that compensation is. And, ask them, how did you get to that number? Are you considering where I'm located based off the salary? So that, and you can have, most of the time, if you're talking with an HR professional, they will have a pretty good conversation with you about that. Because most compensation conversations should happen after the initial job offer. So.
Okay. And we have a question about when reviewing jobs and location nationwide versus in your state. So within our jobs page and our search function, we have the option to choose jobs that are available nationwide, meaning they're available from any location in the US, and those that are specific to a state. And so you can search both ways to see what jobs are available to you. But if something is tagged or marked as a specific state, that employer is generally requiring the applicant to live within that state. And Melinda loves the spreadsheet idea. Let's see if there are any other questions real quick before we move on.
I just wanted to speak to that really quick, Holly. I think we all just love spreadsheets around here, but in the download that you're going to talk about coming up, there is actually a link to a free job tracking spreadsheet. So be sure to download that and check it out. So hopefully that will be helpful to some people. I wanted to touch on really quick here the smaller job boards. I know we talked about LinkedIn. Definitely, they are a wonderful resource for jobs. Indeed has a ton of remote jobs. I mean, it's a job board for all jobs, not just remote. But right now, with so many being remote, they are a good source as well. What I found is that smaller companies tend to post on the niche job sites just because it focuses in on the type of job seekers they're looking for. They don't get quite the flood that they receive when they're posting on, say, Indeed. So I would definitely, when you're looking for a job, start with the smaller job boards that are within your industry. There are many that are just for remote jobs, of course, including Virtual Vocations, but there are also even smaller job boards that cater just to remote writing jobs or just to remote IT jobs or remote education jobs. So definitely, I would suggest and recommend that when you are really drilling down and putting time into your job search, starting with that research on those smaller job boards. And I see Jennifer is asking about a list. We've got a resource that has a list of 50 smaller job boards, which is what you're asking about. And we will drop that link in there in just a minute. So yeah, that would be my suggestion there. So.
All right, we'll go ahead and go to the next slide.
So real quick, Holly, we have just a couple fire questions for resumes that I'll cover real quick. So Vaughn, you asked, is the preference to add skills at the top of the resume? What is the recommendation? I always put them at the top. I think it fits nicely in there. Again, it just goes to most of the time the hiring manager is only going to review the first third of the resume in the initial review. And so you want to have those keywords there so they can absorb them quickly. Putting them at the end really reduces the chance that they're being read. Same thing with Glenda. She mentioned the first page of the resume should be keyword heavy, not as much for the ATS system, Glenda, but a little bit more for the human reader. So that's why I choose to put them at the top in 99.9% of my resumes. I always offer up the opportunity to do things a little bit different based off the candidate. So using keywords, there's a lot of questions about this. So what I'm talking about, just to give a basic overview, is I like to do an executive summary section. So it starts out with a resume title. So you title it as closely as possible to the position that you're pursuing. And then you have 3 to 5 bullets. And this is the key area where you're going to edit it for each position that you apply for. And those bullets are going to indicate your qualifications that you have that fit and match the job vacancy. So although they might stay a little bit the same, you will alter those as you apply for different roles. And then below that, I often put what I call a core competency section where I'll list keywords in, just listing with a bullet or a line in between and listing the keywords and the key skills that my clients have. So that's how I attack keywords on the first page. And then the other question, when you took time off, Paige, did you mention that time period on your resume with transferable skills? I did. I was actually on several boards while I took time off, so I really just focused on that experience. And I also took that time to gain an HR certification and a resume writing certification. So I focused on that in my resume, because if you have a 2 or 3 year block or gap of employment on your resume, it definitely can pop up as a red flag. So if you can fill that in with something that adds value, then it's a win-win situation. So I just wanted to address those kind of keyword questions that came up from the last slide. And how detailed should a resume be as far as dates goes? As my general rule, I only go back 20 years. So anything past 2000, I'll list without dates. Again, it's not a job application. And that's a little tip or trick that you can do to age-proof your resume. And so at that, I'll put a new section. Once I hit around 2000, I'll put a new section and say additional experience, and then Chief Executive Officer for ABC Company, and I don't list dates at that point. So chronological versus functional resumes. Chronological resume lists dates. Functional resume just focuses on, if you're an HR professional, this is all my experience with benefits. This is all my experience with HRIS. I do not recommend those resumes. I think they confuse hiring managers, and it always makes me think that you're trying to hide something. So I recommend some sort of chronological order. I saw a resume the other day that had a column with a timeline of employment and then focused on those functionalities, and that is definitely an option. So I just wanted to address those questions real quick, but moving on to the job interview. An interview, again, a resume gets you an interview gets you a job. So this is your time to really sell yourself, market yourself. A good resume prep also preps you for the interview. You do need to review and research the company as much as you can, reread through the job description, write down any questions that you have, dress the part. You definitely need to dress the part. That doesn't mean a suit and tie or a professional suit these days. You know, research a company and see what they're into. If you show up in a suit and tie to a company that's going to be wearing jeans and a beanie hat, you might look a little bit out of place. So even if it is a Zoom interview, as it would be right now, test your equipment and rehearse responses. And to add on to the rehearsal of responses, I always recommend that my clients actually say the answers out loud. It makes a huge difference. A lot of people just focus on writing down their answers. You actually have to say it out loud, because when you say it out loud, you'll realize, oh, I want to deliver this differently. And rehearse your interview questions with at least 3 people. I know that sounds like a lot of prep, and it is, but it's worth it in the end. What questions do we have about remote job interviews?
Okay, thanks, Paige. So we're still getting quite a few questions in about resumes. So let's talk about one of those while we wait for any interview questions to come in. And this question, they're asking if you've taken time off to care for your family. How do you frame that on the resume? How do you explain that gap? And then also during the interview, how do you talk about that?
You know, again, this is my HR background. I do not like addressing anything that's potentially discriminatory. So when you talk about the fact that you have a family, you're addressing, you know, so I always tend to leave it at care for a family and encourage my clients to leave out as many details as possible. One time I was in an interview and I had someone talk for 10 minutes about their mother's cancer and how they had to care for her. And while that is a moving story, and if I was having a beer with you, I'd love to have that information, it's not pertaining to the job. Does that make sense? So I always encourage my clients to keep it very short and succinct. If you're caring for family, whether it's being a new mom or a new dad, or if you're caring for a family member, you just say, I had to take some time off to care for my family, or I had to take some time off to go to school, things like that. But the key is when you take that break, you have to, in your mind, be thinking about things that you can do to enhance your professional life while you are taking that break. So to show that you have a continued focus on your career, even though you took a break, that's what's going to make a hiring manager turn around on you. So it's not something that they should consider in the hiring process. So I would just really hesitate to encourage people, you know, I took a break to take a religious mission or anything like that. You know, then I know information about you that I don't want to know. Does that make sense? So keep it very short and sweet. And then as far as how to address it in the resume, it's a challenge. It's a real challenge. If you took 6 months off, I'm not going to put it on. I'm going to skip it. For me, I just put care for family, and then I listed everything that I had done since then. So, and I've had to do it for several clients, and it just really depends on the situation, but I try to find the best and most accurate title possible that's going to keep the focus on your career, if that makes sense.
Okay, perfect. And that definitely is part of the strategy that a writer goes through when they're creating a resume. So it will depend. But you can also pull any kind of volunteer work, anything that's relevant to your career goals, and use that in that space as well. But I appreciate especially the HR side and what's okay to say and not okay in an interview. Great. Patricia is talking about the dressing appropriately. And the thought that, or the rule of thumb, was to overdress to show professionalism and respect. So typically you can, research the company and kind of research their culture and see, what might be appropriate to wear to the interview, rather than overdressing. What do you think about that, Paige?
I always think I agree with that statement. You should always take it one step up to show that you're being serious about it. I'd rather overdress than underdress for an interview, but you do want to keep in mind the company culture. So going back to that company culture where people wear hoodie sweatshirts and jeans to work every day, maybe you'll wear a really nice pair of jeans and a button-down top, that's French tucked with a nice belt. I don't know. I'll really go and like nice shoes. So you're fitting in, but you're also dressed up just a hair, maybe more than someone else would be.
Okay. Yeah, I think also that it's different now with so much online and being able to research company culture, and also that it's become a big part of businesses today to kind of tout what their company culture is. So maybe traditionally in the past, I think that probably hasn't been as evident or easy to figure out. So yes, I think the overdressing would definitely come into play more there. But I agree with what you said as far as just taking it up a notch a little bit, above and beyond what you can find out as far as what their culture is today. So.
Okay. And it looks like we are getting to the end of our time. So do we want to wrap up the Q&A? Okay. Yeah. So this is the download that Laura mentioned earlier. We'll have a link in the chat for this download as well as in the email that goes out. But it is a customizable, it's a fillable plan for you and your remote career plan. So that will go out to you and be available. And then Virtual Vocations does offer personalized career help. So our career services team, we offer resume assessments to resume writing, LinkedIn optimization, individual career coaching for interviews and any other part of the career search. Those right now for the new year are 40% off. So now is a great time to take advantage of those. All right. And we just want to thank everyone for being here today. We covered a lot of questions. We'll send out some resources based on what was left there. And if you need any individual help that our customer service team can assist you with, don't hesitate to reach out. And so again, we'll send out the recording. It should be out to you by the end of the week. In an email, it will contain the downloads. And we want to thank you again for joining us today, and we'll see you next time.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.